Welcome back, you guys. This is the Art School Graduate Podcast. My name is Justin Robinson. The guest I have with me today, let's just say he is a creative Swiss Army knife. He's done, let's see, Maurice, what are we talking about here? Let's see, designer, strategist, podcaster, voice actor, creative director for Lunch, one of these multidisciplinary studios that you've created. And like I could go on and on and on, but I'm not going to do all that. You guys, today I have the great Maurice Cherry with us on today for our podcast. Maurice, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So let's jump right into it, Maurice. You have a background spanning, like I just said, design, strategy, podcasting. How do these different disciplinaries inform and influence each other in your work?
Oh, well, I mean, I think it gives me a sort of pool of potential, like, inspiration and things to pull from. I think it's interesting that your show is called the Art School Dropout Podcast.
Graduate.
Art School Graduate, yeah. I didn't go to art school, so I already come at this from a different perspective with respect to, like, appreciation for the craft. Like, I didn't study it. I mean, I studied it, but not in a formal, academic kind of way. So the way that I look at it is from, my background, actually, like my undergraduate degree is in mathematics. So like I've done a lot of like 3D modeling and graphing and stuff like that. So there's an appreciation for that level of design, tessellation, patterns, things of that nature. But then also I write a lot. So I'm always looking at how things can be structured in ways that make sense. I feel like they all just sort of feed into each other. And depending on what the project is that I'm either creating or working on, it just gives me, honestly, more skills to bring to the table. Like I can do more than just the visual. I can do the copy. I can do other things, but also because I have knowledge of all of these things, I know how they all work together. So I may know how the copy needs to change to inform the visual. I may know how the visuals need to change to enhance the media or something like that, as opposed to having just one kind of narrow skill set on a certain focus of a project. I can really look at like an entire project scope from start to finish and contribute at every step.
Let's talk about that transformation from math into the creative realm. What pulled you to do that? Because those are almost, to me, because I'm an artist and I didn't understand math that much. How did that come together for you?
How did it come together? Not easily, and I would say more out of necessity than anything else. When I first started in college, I went to Morehouse College. When I first started there, I was a computer science, computer engineering dual degree major. And then after that first semester, it wasn't really something for me in terms of the type of programming that they did, because I was under the assumption that we would be doing web programming, because I had started doing like HTML programming and graphic design in high school in the 90s. So I sort of thought that's what the computer science would be, and it wasn't. And so after that first semester, I switched over to math, mainly because I looked at my credits and I looked at the school handbook to see, okay, what can I switch to where I can A, still keep my scholarship, and B, still graduate on time. And math actually not only had me graduating on time, but graduating early. So I said, bet, let's switch over to math. Also, I was captain of like the math club in high school, so it wasn't a huge switch in terms of like comprehension. Like I was already there on an engineering scholarship. So it wasn't a big switch in that respect.
Gotcha.
But I was already like interested in the web. I just didn't have an outlet for it, because this is 1999. Like my computer science advisor told me that the internet was a fad and then I should give it up. So there wasn't exactly like a place for me to really implement it while I was in school. Right. And so I kind of studied math. I mean, I like math, don't get me wrong. It was really a bit of a stopgap, because on the side I was doing like websites for clients in the neighborhood and things like that, and using cracked versions of Photoshop and trying to learn, like trying to teach myself these concepts about design, because it just wasn't something that the school had. And then after I graduated, I mean, I had a math degree, but I couldn't get a job. I was working customer service jobs for like 3 years after college. Like I sold tickets at the Symphony Atlanta. I was a telemarketer for the Atlanta Opera. And the last job that I had before I got fired was I was working as a dealer concierge for Auto Trader and got fired. And I remember like walking out of the Auto Trader building about to go home, and I was calling my mom and telling her, and she was, kind of giving me the come to Jesus talk. Like, what are you going to do? Like, you got this degree, like, you're not using it. Like, what are you going to do? I mean, I had always been doing the design stuff on the side, but it always was a hobby. Like, I was doing like wallpapers, and I would go to Barnes and Noble, and because I couldn't afford those like $50 Photoshop books, I would go with my little digital camera and just take pictures and then go home and use the pictures, basically stealing essentially, but like using Barnes and Noble as like a lending library to teach myself on this cracked version of Photoshop that I downloaded from LimeWire, which thankfully did not give my computer a virus. I was running and gunning for a long time trying to sort of just figure out design, but like I was doing the design thing as a hobby. It wasn't anything that I ever like thought about as being an actual profession, because this was like roughly 2005. I didn't see other like people kind of in the profession, but I also wasn't really looking at the industry as a profession. I was, let's see, my God, that was 2005. I was like 23, 24, something like that. Like I was just trying to pay rent.
Yeah.
And I'm making a roof over my head. And I had applied to a position in the back of our alt weekly newspaper, Creative Loafing, for an electronic media specialist at the Georgia World Congress Center. And I was like, I kind of know, I think, enough to at least apply. Like I had sort of built a portfolio based off of things that I had designed out of these books. And it turns out the guy who was currently in the position who was leaving also went to my alma mater. So I was like, we
Direct link.
warehouse connection, we gonna hook it up. That part didn't really work out, but I did get an interview. I did manage to kind of show my skills, and that was my first design job. And so I say it was really out of necessity because it wasn't something that I really had like a trajectory towards doing. It was, you're broke, have to pay rent.
You're right.
You have skills to do something, and this customer service thing is not working. So what do you need? Because I didn't want to go to grad school. Like I went to college 2 weeks after I graduated high school. So I didn't have any sort of break to like go out into the world and do things. And all the internship things that I had in school, like I interned 2 years for NASA, were all around like robotics and engineering. But I didn't want to go right into that. And with a math degree, the only thing I could really get a job as was a math teacher. And I didn't want to teach because in the state of Georgia, they wanted you to have a teaching like certificate or something. I was like, it's not working out. So what can I do? What can I use to try to get what I need so I can keep a roof over my head? Design came back.
Oh, wow. Listen, you're not too far off with people getting the cracked version. The first version I had from Adobe was I went on Craigslist and somebody had burnt the whole master suite, and I had to meet up with them, and they just had it on a CD. They put it in my computer. They downloaded it, put their whatever codes they had. I guess Adobe used to send out codes. Whatever codes he had, put it in, and I had that for my whole college. Going on, let's see, from junior college to college, I had it was cracked, but I couldn't update it, but I could do what I needed to do.
Because it was expensive back then. And like, this was also around the time that Adobe had bought Macromedia. And so they were starting to phase out some Macromedia. Because like, actually for my first design job, I used Photoshop and Macromedia. I used Macromedia Fireworks, which I still miss to this day. I used Fireworks. I used Macromedia Director to make like interactive CDs, but then we also used Illustrator and Photoshop. I was kind of straddling the line between those two in my first design gig, but it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot working for the state doing that.
Nice. So now we're in design. We got this little taste of it, and then you go ahead and launch Lunch. What can you break that down to us? What is that? I'm curious about the name too, but because I've interviewed Eddie Opara, and
Eddie,
he's hilarious because he has a funny name for his design company that he started. So I wonder if it's, I don't know, just as funny as yours may be, because he had a story about how he came to his first design company name.
So lunch came about because, well, I'll just tell you like the concept and then like how I came around to the name. Lunch came around because I had worked as a designer from 2005 to 2008. I started at the state of Georgia. Then I left there. I worked for AT&T as a junior designer and then became a senior designer. And honestly, I just felt like I could do better. The work at AT&T was, you were very much a production designer. Everything kind of came through on an assembly line. You had a software thing that you logged into. You picked the job that you were going to get. Then you had to go and walk over to this file cabinet and get like an actual physical folder that the salesperson had sent in because they went out in the field and talked to the company. So now you've got written notes that you need to transcribe, and you've got a logo that you need to scan, and you've got like there's like it's not, it wasn't. I mean, this was from 2006 to 2008. So we had like one flatbed scanner that 30 designers had to share. So you had to take turns on getting your stuff scanned in, then you have to trace it in Illustrator, and like sometimes you put animation to it. And the thing was, you were doing these websites, and when I say it was an assembly line, like they gave you a time limit to do it. So a 1-page website had to be done in 3 hours or less. A 5-page website had to be done in 5 hours or less, and a like 5 to 9-page website had to be done within 8 hours. So you had to like get on, and I mean, you're coding from scratch. There are no templates.
No. No. No.
Every designer kind of had their own thing that eventually they figured out. Like I had created my own CSS framework, and because you had to, like, not only did you have to design things in this manner in this amount of time, every person was being tracked on this like Glenn Ross board. So you knew at any given point in time where you stood at your team, like in your team and among the entire team in terms of your design thing. And so you always want to be on top, because if you fell below a certain threshold, you got fired. There was no...
And you can visibly see that on
the board?
Everyone
can see it. Everyone at any point in time can walk by and see exactly where you're at. Like, got to get your numbers up this week. It's like, I know that. I don't need you, random person who I don't telling me this. You know what I'm saying? It's like everyone could see it, because we were also on the same floor with like salespeople and QA and everything. They were just it was just one big cube farm. And I felt like I could do better. I was like, this is not where I saw my career kind of going after college. Just kind of like cranking out websites on an assembly line, just like pick up the next one. You get the other one, you can pick up the next one. And I did quit there, but I quit because I found out they were underpaying me. And then once I got my back pay, I quit, and I used that money to start my studio. So initially when I started the studio, I called it 318 Media. And I was trying to like find a way to differentiate myself in the market. So it started with the number 3, and then it had the word 18 spelled out, because the 3 and the E are like, they have that like vertical symmetry.
Yeah.
And also when you put a 3 and an E together, it sort of looks like the Pisces sign, because I'm a Pisces. My birthday is on March 18th. So I was like, oh, this is like cute, quirky, clever, horrible to market. You quickly find out how many web forms do not let you start your business name with a number. Wow. And in Atlanta, there was also a 360 Media and a 352 Media, and people kept getting us confused, contacting one for the other. And I think like that went on roughly until about, I want to say like 2013-ish, 2012, 2013. And that's when I changed the name to Lunch, because I was thinking of the branding possibilities of where you could go with Lunch based off of my time working like for the state, my time working in corporate at AT&T, and just seeing like what people gravitate towards. If there's one thing anybody that's working in an office gravitates towards, it's lunch. They want a lunch hour, they want a lunch break or something like that. And I could see all the different things that I could spawn from that. Like I used to do a lunch and learn series where I would go to offices and talk about design principles and stuff like that. And there's a catered meal, and then I walk away with business or something like that. But then also I could release design collateral that had like this sort of snacky appeal to it. Like, oh, here's this month's snack pack. Also, my last name is a food. It's Cherry. So like it all just kind of like worked together. Even my cards were, I eventually had paper. When I first started out, I had those like plastic, those like key fob from CVS. That was my business card because I wanted people to put it on their key ring. Like if they were going to a sub shop, they could get something marked off. So it's like, you get 5 design things, you get the 6th one free or something like that. So it builds in that kind of like brand loyalty. So that's where lunch really kind of came from. I was like, it's catchy. It's easy to remember. There was a lot of things that you could like play on people's kind of curiosity about. And that's kind of where it spawned from there. But yeah, at first it was 318 Media. It just didn't roll
work
well marketing wise, and I ended up switching it to lunch.
So during this time, you got this business going where there probably was a lot of ups and downs, but were there any challenges that you faced where you felt like, okay, I shouldn't have been here? Or was there anything like that where you were just like, okay, this is too much?
I mean, I think you always will run into clients that you just don't see eye to eye with. When I first started out, I started lunch in 2008, into 2008, going into 2009. And one of our first clients was a mayoral candidate that was running in Atlanta at the time. So like I was on the campaign working with them, everything like that. The candidate didn't win, but once the campaign was over, I kind of continued doing work for them as they switched over to a healthcare nonprofit. And so a lot of the work that I did was in that kind of like nonprofit space, healthcare, things of that nature. But people also knew me for the political work I did. And so I would get basically Republicans that were interested, Democrats that were interested. Sometimes these were people who I had no sort of ideological like stance with, but the check cleared. Like, what are you going to do? I definitely have had some like clients from hell. What I've learned though, kind of just through doing all of that is, there's really kind of no such thing as a client from hell, because as the vendor, you always have the luxury of firing a client. And I think at first I didn't really get that. I was just grateful for any business I could get. I was like, yes, I'll take it. Money, I'll take it. And I didn't really get discerning about who I wanted to do business with. Roughly until about like my 5th year of business, I didn't really start getting like, really discerning, like these are the kind of people I work with best. And like once that happened, the whole like client from hell thing just like went out the window, because now you're working with people that understand the communication style, like you work on the same level. I would have clients that felt like I was 24/7, and I'm like, buddy, you're paying me $600 for a website. You will get these emails when I'm good and ready. Like not on like some procrastinating kind of tip, but just
they want to update every hour on the hour.
Well, yeah, you find that the people who want to pay you the least want your time the most. And then like even like with the political clients, they often didn't want to pay anything. They just thought you should be doing it like for the cause. And I'm like, no, I can't pay my rent with good intentions. I need money. So there was a lot of that like early on where I was just trying to like figure out how to do business. I went to graduate school. My graduate degree is in telecommunications management, but there were business aspects in there, but entrepreneurship thing is really like, for me, it was like a trial by fire. It was figuring out how to run a business, but then also how to run my business.
Gotcha.
Which I think every entrepreneur eventually comes to that point. Don't get me wrong, especially like in the early 2010s, there was no shortage of people trying to tell you how to run your business. Like all kinds of folks that were doing courses and everything that wanted to tell you, like, this is how you do it. This is how you do, blah, this kind of contract and this kind of thing you should be doing, this, that, and the third. And it's like, you have to make your business work for you as a person, especially if you're a sole proprietor of the business, once you take employees on, which I did roughly around also the 5th year, I like took on a small team. But figuring out sort of how to run your business as well as how to run a business just in general, like was something that took me years to figure out. I wish I had figured it out sooner, but by the time I figured it out, like things were going great. So it kind of worked out in my favor.
Okay. That's good. That's good. Glad that worked out, because I've heard horror stories, and you probably have too, of design companies where it's just like after the first year, they're just like, this is too much. I can't, because I think they don't realize exactly what you said, is finding out what kind of clientele you want, and being able to just say no to a check because that's a toxic person for them.
Like there's scope creep. There are things that just happen where you're like, you know what, this has gone way farther than what I can take on, or you've added more to the project and you're not funding these extra things that you're asking for. Like you really have to be almost like a shrink and like really sort of get to the root of like, what is it that the client wants? Because often the client doesn't know what they want. What they want is not necessarily what you may be giving right off the bat. Let me sort of clarify that. A customer will come to me and say that they want a website. Do they want a website, or do they want to get more sales? Do they want a website, or do they want a way to better show off the work that they do? Do they want a website, or do they want a way for clients to easily be able to book business with them? So being able to get to exactly what it is that they want, you find out that the website, the deliverable, is just a conduit to get to that. It's still up to the business to do what the website will provide for them in order to get to the goal that they want. But like, as the vendor, you realize like that's not my job. Like my job is not to help you get more business because I'm not a business consultant. I just design the website.
Right.
If we design the website and you're still not getting business, that's not my problem.
Right.
And you have to get like clear with them about like, hey, you still have to do what you have to do. I just provided you a better looking storefront. If people still aren't coming in and shopping, problem ain't with me, not with me. And you have to get really real with them about that, because they often will feel that because they have this shiny new digital product that you've delivered, that now everything will be better. And it's like, no, you still have to do your work. You still have to run your business. So,
and I think a lot of them don't understand the importance of those. They don't understand that. And it's like, well, you're the designer, you should be able to do it. And it's like, whoa. Keyword.
No. I would tell clients like what I do and don't do. I'm like, we'll do visual design. We don't write copy. Or we'll do visual design. We don't edit copy. We don't do SEO. If you want that, I can maybe bring someone in, but that's not like a direct service that I offer. Right. We'll do branding and we'll do visual design. That's it. And again, this is getting to what the client really wants. When they say they want a website, the client may not have the vocabulary to really say what it is that they want, but as the designer, it's up to you to sort of like ask the right questions, get to the answer you need to know exactly what it is that they want.
Exactly. I agree with you 100%. So now we're changing turning the page actually, because you're stepping into the world of podcasting. And you have a critically acclaimed podcast that has been inducted into the Smithsonian now. So let's talk about Revision Path. What is it? How did it come about? What was the initial vision behind it? And yeah, because I heard a few episodes, so that's why I was like, okay.
Oh, Revision Path. I think that started, honestly, it really started back in 2006. I had started the year prior in 2005. I started an online event called the Black Weblog Awards, where I had set out to recognize Black designers and bloggers and podcasters that I knew were doing great work, but were not being recognized in the industry whatsoever, not by other blogging awards or anything. And so I wanted to do something to that point. And in 2006, we debuted the best blog design category, because I had friends that were designers and I knew they were doing like fantastic work, but like nobody knew it was them. They didn't know that like a Black woman designed Mariah Carey's website. They didn't know that, a Black guy had designed this huge ad campaign that's up in Times Square and stuff like that. And so I wanted to do that to kind of give some recognition to that work. But the Black Weblog Awards and that one category was just one small part of a larger thing. And I sort of kept that idea in the back of my head for years. I mean, I did the Black Weblog Awards from 2005 to 2010. I sold it in 2011. And the idea to do something that celebrated Black designers, actually that intensity grew stronger, because now I was a working designer with my own studio. Like I was like, I really want to do this now, because now that I'm out in the market, I see like we really don't get any love at all. Like We don't get it in-house. We don't get it if we do our own thing. So like there has to be some platform. And also the design community was definitely not talking about us unless it was during Black History Month. Maybe. And even then, it would be like the same handful of people. And no shade to those people. Love Gail, love Eddie, love all the greats that came before us. But I was like, there's more of us out here. And yes, the AIGAs and such as are showcasing like the handful of Black designers that they know. But like, there's more of us out here. Why aren't you talking about us or at least shining a light on us? And so 2013 came and I had the idea to do something. It initially it was going to be a magazine. It was going to be a website, like a visual magazine. It was going to be me and someone else that started. It was going to be 2 people. But like at the 11th hour, they backed out and I had already bought the domain name. And so I was like, well, I guess we just gonna roll with it. And I decided to call it Revision Path because I knew from doing the Black Weblog Awards, because I did that from 2005 to 2010. So that encompassed Obama's first term. And so I knew how people kind of like shied away from anything Black. They're like, oh, we're post-racial now. We don't focus on that kind of thing. We don't see that. And I was like, I didn't want to call it something Black in the name because I knew that would immediately turn people off from even like trying to see what it's about. But if you look at it, you're like, oh, this is a Black thing. Like I wanted it to be like completely overt in that way, but I didn't want the name to turn it off because I saw when I did the Black Weblog Awards how I would mention it and it would just go right over people's heads. I'm like, but like NPR covered our winners in 2007. They had a show where they made a whole segment based off of the winners of the awards and turned those people from bloggers into pundits that still do this to this day. But you heard the word Black and you're just like, oh, it's nothing. It's fine. It's nothing. So I wanted to, again, this branding, right? Like I wanted to name it something different to hopefully escape that. And so it started out as an online magazine and, this is something honestly that even up until I stopped doing it was a problem that I faced, is that nobody would really talk to me. They're like, wait a minute, who are you? Maurice Cherry? I don't know that. Where are you from? What school did you go to? Like there were a lot of people, especially in roughly the first 2 years, that were just like, we don't know who you are. And so it became hard to find people that would actually even talk to me, because there were Black designers that were like, oh, I'm not trying to put myself out there like that. And then there would be Black designers that would say, this is just like BET. How dare you, blah, 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 this, that, the third. And I'm like, chill out. But there were some that would talk to me like, in the first, like, I'd say maybe 24 or so folks, which I'm very grateful for. But I realized if I wanted to do this as a magazine, I would need it to have more consistency. Like I couldn't interview one person, then take 2 months off, and then have another person, and then take 2 months off. Also, I was doing these interviews over email, and so people weren't necessarily responding in a speedy fashion. And I'm like, this is not working out the way I wanted to. Like, this was going to end before I could even really get it off the ground. And I had interviewed, when was this? When did I interview Raquel? This is when Raquel Rodriguez, she had read Revision Path. She was a designer in Chicago. And she hit me up. She was like, hey, I'm going to be in Atlanta. I was wondering if, like, I've heard about Revision Path. Can we do an interview? And I was like, sure. Great.
Yeah.
So I remember we went to this restaurant. I don't even think the restaurant exists anymore. We went to One Eared Stag in Inman Park in Atlanta. And we did first podcast interview. I did not have any gear. I had my phone, which was a G1 from T-Mobile, the first Google phone that had the flip thing on it. And we recorded it on that. Like I set the phone on the table and we talked. So it picks up every rumble and jostle. So it's not good audio. And I've tried to clean it up over the years and I'm just like, just leave it like it is. But that was the first podcast interview. And I knew how to like work with audio, mix and master audio and all this stuff, because I was a musician in high school as well as throughout my 20s. So like I knew my way around a DAW. Like it wasn't nothing to take the audio and see what I needed to do with it. And I was like, this is actually a lot quicker than trying to do like a written interview for a magazine. So it was at that point that I kind of switched over to the notion of doing podcasts. And what would happen is when I'd reach out to folks, I would ask them, do you want to do a written interview or do you want to do a podcast? And folks would always be like, what is a podcast? Oh, you mean that thing like Serial? I'm like, Yeah, like that. Like we could do a podcast. And so eventually in, I think it was 2014, March 2014, episode 16 with Alicia Randolph was when I completely switched over to just podcasts, because I'm like, so much simpler. And rather than give the choice, I'm just saying we're going to record a podcast and this is the information you need, all this sort of stuff. And it just went from there.
Yeah. Wonderful, man. And for you to do so many, I actually, when I went to your website and I went to I was like, this dude was cooking. He went through a lot. Oh, man. So let's talk about that. You have so many and crazy, wonderful, good conversation. It's a lot of meat on those bones. How did you choose these creatives to be featured on the podcast? Was it through connections? Was it someone, they referred someone to you? How did that come about?
Honestly, a lot of it, I would say, like, if I look at the full archive, I would say like 90% of that is just straight up cold call.
Wow.
I saw your profile on LinkedIn. Oh, would you like to be on my show? Here's a link to it. You let me know if you're interested. Most of that was just me hitting people up on the random. Because when I first started out, and this is, I don't know, it's about an interesting thing. When I first started out, the first people who I asked were like friends of mine who were Black designers, and they all said no. None of them wanted to do it. They were like, I don't want to be out there like that. I don't know if I really got anything to say. I don't want to do that. And I was like, oh, okay. So I'm really starting from like
Scratch.
0, nowhere. And so I'm like on Google 2013, Black designers in Atlanta. And it's giving me, fashion designers is like the default. And I'm like, no, Black graphic designers, Black web design. Like I'm trying to narrow down the search terms to find people. And I found my first guest. I mean, well, Raquel was my first podcast guest, but my first actual person I interviewed was this guy named Frederick Royster. And I found him on LiveJournal. So like there was a lot of just me searching and trying to find folks. Now, as I started to do more, and as the show started to get out there and there was word of mouth, then I did end up getting connections like, oh, you should talk to this person. Oh, let me introduce you to this person. Those introductions would happen maybe 50% of the time. Sometimes the person would do it, sometimes they wouldn't. Or I would be introduced to a new person, and that new person is like, no, I don't. There was certainly a time, I would say, like when the pandemic like first hit in 2020, that was a difficult time to get guests because, one, I think people were just like worn out from the pandemic, George Floyd, racial reckoning. Like they were just like, I'm not Black today. I don't want to do it. Like I just don't want. And I would have some people that would, how should I phrase this? I did have some people who are Black folks who adamantly speak up about Black issues that were just like, yeah, I don't know if I really want to like be associated with like a Black thing. So I don't know if I really want to do that. Like,
what sense does that make?
I mean, okay, you don't want to do a Black thing. I mean, look, hey, whenever you show up and identify the world, I got nothing to do with ask you to be on a podcast. If you want to do it, it's fine. But, and I want to be clear, it's not a person named Keisha. I just threw that name out there. But it did become hard at some points to really find people because of just the way culture shifted,
Yeah.
But no, as I started to get out there and learn more and people knew who I was, like now they knew my name and it was associated with something, then it became a lot easier to get guests. And especially after the Smithsonian thing, it became easier because people started to recommend themselves. But then the problem that came with that is that people don't read. And so they just see podcast Smithsonian and they're just pitching anything. And like 95% of those pitches, I have to turn away because I'm like, you're not Black. You're not a designer. Where do we go from here? Romance novel authors pitching themselves to me. They can talk to your audience about what? It's not a fit, So once the notoriety of the show got out there, it certainly, I'm still on a couple of PR lists, but the folks are just not like, this person's not a guest because they don't fit the show. Like, did you listen to the show? Did you read the log line? Did you see any sort of way that your client and this show could match?
Yeah.
Like just stuff like that. So, but no, most of it really was just like, and I'm surprised LinkedIn would never give me sponsorship because I use LinkedIn like to find most of the guests that I've had on the show. Like I use LinkedIn down I guest on the show. And, I'd say it's still pretty helpful to find people. It always surprised me when this was, I say, right around the time I did the South by Southwest presentation in 2015 called Where Are the Black Designers? Because companies would write to the show and be like, how are you finding all these people? And I mean, we can't find any designers for
Wow.
like, my melanin is not giving me special search powers. I'm on LinkedIn and I'm like, oh, there's a black face. Let me send a message. Like, it's not hard because I'm doing the easy work.
Searching. That's all you can do.
That's all you get. I mean, well, not even just searching, but like actually reaching out. That's how, and like the worst thing they can say is no or not answer. And then you move on to the next person. Like by the time I want to say like 2015, 2016, like I had a system down pat of like when to reach out to people. And a lot of my system was automated. So like reaching out to people, there was a form they filled out on the website. Once they filled out that form on the website and they could book their own date and time, the system would send them reminder emails to let them know your interview's coming up in 3 days, your interview's coming up in 1 day, your interview's coming up in 30 minutes. So I could just sit back, do the questions, and then like they show up and it's all good. So a lot of that I automated, which was how we were really able to like crank out like week after week after week, is one, just have that automated system. But then two, I had a team that was helping me out. Like my editor, RJ, is like my brother. Like I would not have gotten the volume of episodes produced that I had without his help. Like we had a system set up. Like if I recorded on a Monday, I would upload the audio that Monday. He would have it ready for me maybe by like that Thursday, Friday. I get a transcript done. That transcript's ready by Saturday. I load it up by Sunday, and then by the next week it's done. And so because the interviews were fairly green, in terms of when we did it, like I could batch like weeks of interviews, which allowed me to then like have structured themes around certain things. If there's stuff I wanted to talk about that was happening in the news, I could find a way to like weave it in and it still be timely by the time the episode comes out. So that system allowed me that flexibility to be able to, one, keep a regular weekly structure, but then also like bring in topics that were relevant, that were happening at the time. I was able to have guests on like when Trump first got elected. I was able to have guests on like when the pandemic started. I was able to have guests on during like the summer reckoning with George Floyd. Like I was able to have folks on to talk about things as they happen at these different sort of touch points, just like in culture. So that's really, the testament of how I was able to make it happen. Like it wasn't just me. My team really helped. But again, I just asked. I really just asked people and hoped that they would say yes. I wish it could be as simple as me just dropping a name and they're like, oh, I would absolutely do it. No. I wish it was that simple.
Listen, I'm learning that now. You learning that now? I'm learning it now. Even before you said it, I was like, how am I supposed to? Let's do it. Draft it up, send it out as a message. Now, was this before LinkedIn was charging people to send messages where you could send unlimited?
No, by the first or second year, by the second year of Revision Path, like we started getting sponsors. So I would weave that. No, I was paying out of sponsor money to set up a LinkedIn premium account so I could have a certain number of in-mails that I would send out.
Gotcha.
But also I would use this service. I don't even know if the service is active anymore. It's called like Contact Out, I think is what it's called. But it's a Chrome extension where it will take you, like if you go to a person's LinkedIn page, it will find their email address. So then you don't have to send an in-mail. You can just send something directly to their email. And so I'm pretty sure I'm on a bunch of spam lists now because I was going out. I would send so many emails because I would do batches for when I'm interviewing, and I always try to reach out to at least 20 people at once, 10 men and women, and see what comes back. Most of the time I get roughly like 30% of the folks I reached out to would respond. And then you just go from there with like scheduling and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, you name a Black designer out there, I have 9 times out of 10, probably 10 times out of 10 reached out to them in some capacity. Like, yeah, lots of emails. But no, I was paying for it out of sponsor money with like.
Okay. Okay. Because, yeah, I didn't know if LinkedIn was still having people upgrade to get the InMail tokens to send out by that time.
No, it was what, $60 a month, something like that, to do it.
That's crazy.
That's why I wanted LinkedIn to sponsor me, because I'm like, look, I'm using your platform, and they were just like, well, actually, I never really heard back from LinkedIn about sponsorship, even though I did talk to people that worked there. I'm like, hey, like, put in a word, see if they
Right.
want.
So, was there any one conversation that you found like impactful or surprising that you were like, wow, this kind of left me floored a little bit? Or were most of them kind of what I would say, what you expected?
Well, that's a good question. I never really know what fully to expect out of a conversation, because these people are 9 times out of 10, these are strangers. I don't know these people. They don't know me.
Right.
In the rare instance where I am introduced to someone that I know or that I've interviewed before, because I have had repeat guests, then I sort of have a sense of like where the conversation can go, and I can go deeper. And I think those conversations are surprising because it's able to plumb past the surface level into sort of deeper concepts. Like, for example, I've had Sarah Honey Young on my show 3 times now. And each time we've had an interview, it's been like a deeper level of like what it means to be a creative, what it means to be a modern creative, what it means to be like a modern creative and a mom and an entrepreneur, and like, trying to juggle like Sarah, someone who went from honey, someone who went from like really being a designer to now like she's a full-fledged DJ. And so like even talking about like that creative progression and like what that's meant for her, and how because she is someone who is like such a talented, just like creative force. Like, I'm saying she's not a designer in that she doesn't do the design that she used to do, which was mostly like web and graphic. But I mean, she's designed posters, she does photo shoots. She had this whole like, I think it was like a photojournalistic series called American Woman. Like, she's done and continues to do like phenomenal type of work. But and like every conversation I've had with her, it's allowed me to go like deeper and deeper and deeper into that, because we're not going to talk about the web designs you did 10, 15 years ago, because what's the point? Like,
Right.
talk about what you're doing now. Like, how do you perceive your work now? Like, how do things now? So I find those repeated conversations are good, because you can get past the like, what was your biggest inspiration? Like, you can get past the surface level stuff and like really go deep into conversations. But again, most of these are folk that I don't know. So when I'm structuring and thinking about the conversations and who to have on there, I'm always taking into account like the diversity that exists in what could be perceived as a monolithic set. The archive page on Revision Path is overwhelming for a reason. Like, I want you to be flooded with a wall of blackness that you did not know about when you look at, like, that is on purpose. That is by design. I want you to look at that and feel like, I don't know who any of these people are. That's the point. That is the point. And so for me, because like oftentimes these are my first conversations with them, I am finding out like who they are, what their personality is like, based on their age or their education or their location or anything like that. Like, how do these things factor into who they are as a designer and the type of work that they do? Because a designer in Atlanta is going to be different from a designer in London. It's going to be different from a designer in Zimbabwe. It's going to be different from a designer in the Philippines. It's going to be different from a designer in Australia. But they all Black.
Right.
Finding the diversity within what people might just think is like one big monolithic group of folks usually means I can get pretty like diverse viewpoints. And again, because I'm able to plan out ahead, I can think about certain like viewpoints that I want to track throughout interviews. So I'd say roughly from 2021 to maybe about when the show ended, like, I think every guest I had on, I asked about like generative AI and like, what does it mean for you in your work? Do you use it? Do you like it? Some folks are all in on it. They use it all the time for everything. Some folks are like, get it away from me. I don't mess with it at all. Like, seeing how it exists along the spectrum, being able to sort of find that through line throughout all the interviews is something that's really interesting. And also for many of them, these are things that they think about in their work, but nobody's ever asked them about it. like, there are so many folks that I had on who said the only kind of time I really talk about this stuff is if it's a job interview.
Wow.
Like, they talk about it with their friends, they don't talk about it with their family or their significant others. It's like, wow, And so
Right.
I'm glad that Revision Path existed as a platform to allow them to be able to talk about their bread and butter. Like, this is the work that you do. This is the creative work that you put out in the world. And, I want you to be able to tell it in your own voice. There's no gatekeeper here. There's no overarching edict or anything. It's just you tell your story. Here's the mic.
Well, thank you for doing that, because that has been very fruitful, because I'm a designer, I'm a teacher. So I am now challenging my students to do that. Like, go find people within your culture. Go find people who are creatives within that space, because like you said, I was like, I'm from California, LA. We design differently than someone in New York, someone in Portland, someone down in Florida. So just like, look for these people, because a lot of times they spend a lot of time scrolling, but not actually paying attention to it. They scroll. They doomsday scroll, or as they call it, brain rot scroll. And so I think having a space where I can help students, mostly what I'm trying to pull in is a lot of Black students, because they're very few in art and design. And so when I get those, automatically I'm like, hey, here's some podcasts, go listen to them. These are designers, look them up, look at their work, look at these people, because sometimes it gets tough being a Black designer. I'm not even gonna hold you to that. It is difficult.
Hey, I know.
So yeah. So let's talk about this one last thing about your Revision Path podcast, the Smithsonian. How did that come apart, and how do you feel about that? I know it, to me, I'd be like, I'd have it on a shirt. I'd have my podcast on the front and Smithsonian inducted into the Smithsonian. I'd wear it like a Lakers jersey out here.
That's not a bad idea now that you say it.
Put the podcast on and then have a QR code where they can listen to it, and they can see where my stats are with the Smithsonian.
No, for real. That's not a bad. So the Smithsonian, that started in 2015. Actually, to be honest, it starts at 2015, but like the connection actually goes back to 1996. I haven't told this part of the story before, so you're getting an exclusive here.
All right.
Picture it, 1996. I was first trombone in the local community college's jazz band, and one of the performing artists they had there, I think I played back in this concert, was for this jazz singer, Nina Freelon, who's a Grammy Award-winning jazz singer, still performs to this day. So that was 1996, way back when. Fast forward now to 2015, and I went to the first Black in Design conference at Harvard University. It was the African-American African-American Graduate Design Student Union or something like that. But they were putting on this biennial conference called Black in Design. And I remember trying to get so many people to go, and they were just like, but they're not talking about Photoshop. They're not talking about...
Right.
And I'm like, no, it's a Black design conference. You know how many of these we get to go to? 0. Because everyone that we hear about, we're either not there or it's not about us. I'm like, this is about us. And it's at Harvard. $50, let's go. And folks were like, no, I'm going to do it. So, well, I'm going to go. So I went, and this was right before the Blacksonian opened. So this was 2015, and they were actually at the conference, like soliciting people to donate things, like to the opening of the museum. Like if you have relics and things, like if you want to see them, like donate, because the theme around the first Black in Design conference was like the home. And they were like the home as a neighborhood, the home as a region, like they sort of like started small and then like branched out. And I think all these talks are still on YouTube. If you search Black in Design, you should be able to find them. They're still really good talks. But I met one of the curators for the museum there, and I had mentioned, like, my name is Maurice Cherry. I got this podcast. I just started it. Like, we're about to come up on 100 episodes. If you'd want to check it out, maybe to include in the museum or something. And she was just like, okay. And like, took my card and was like, whatever. But one of the keynote speakers there that year was Phil Freelon, who was Nina Freelon's husband. And I got to talk with him. He was interviewed by Daryl Crooks, who at the time was the art director at The Atlantic. Now he works for Apple. I still think he works for Apple, actually. once you work for Apple, they lock it down. Like you work for Apple, you set. But I think at the time he was either just leaving the Atlantic and going to Apple, or he was already at Apple, one of the two. But I got a chance to like introduce myself to Phil, and I told him like, yeah, I thank you so much for like this museum. It's such a great thing, because he was one of the like key architects behind it. Him, David Ajay, and I think another firm or something. But I mentioned that like, oh yeah, I remember I met your wife like back in like '96. She had performed in Selma, Alabama, and I don't think he knew, but he was like, oh yeah, and I'm like, okay. All right. I was like, you're humoring me. I get that. I appreciate that. Like, there's no way that you could have known from back then. But so it's a biennial conference. So they had it again in 2017. And so I went in 2017. That same curator was there. I introduced myself to her then, like, oh, do you remember me? My name is Maurice Cherry. I still have this podcast called Revision Path, coming up on 250 episodes if you want to check it out. And she was like, okay, well, she's like, that's a lot of episodes. I was like, yeah. I was like, you check it out. I've had all this person. And she's like, yeah, I'll take a look. I'll take a listen. I'm like, great. And so it was like, when was that? I want to say like later in 2018 was when the museum reached out to me, and they were like, we've listened through the podcast and we've determined these episodes that we would like to include in the archive for the Smithsonian. And I was like, oh. So they did. I was surprised. Like, I thought I was being a pest, because for the podcast, with as many people as I've had on, like, you have to sort of like get rid of that fear of rejection. So you just go out there and be like, whatever. So I didn't think I would actually hear back, and they got back to me. And so we kind of went back and forth on the list of names, and we settled on 10 names at the time that we were going to have included. And they were not just U.S. designers. I think there was one UK designer. Maybe two, but I know there was at least one, John Daniel, who's passed on now. But we had agreed on those, and they were like, okay, well, we're going to do what we have to do, which is obtain museum rights, which essentially means they have to like contact the guest and let them know this is happening. They have to agree to it. And so that took, I think, the rest of 2018 going into 2019. At the time, I was working for this startup called Glitch, and the Smithsonian had gotten back to me about, yes, we're like ready to have these episodes and put them in the Smithsonian. And I was like, can you add one more? Because we're coming up on episode 300. It's with Hannah Beekler, who's the production designer behind Black Panther. She's worked with Ryan Coogler. She's worked with Beyonce. I was like, can we? Because honestly, I was trying to secure the interview, and I already told them before the Smithsonian said yes that they would include it. So I was kind of trying to use it as a bargaining chip to land Hannah. That's the interview, which worked out in my favor, thankfully. And they were like, yeah, we can add it in, because I had been to the museum that I think I ended up going like summer 2018 or something like that, and I saw how much Black Panther stuff was in there, like in the gift shop and everything. I was like, dang, y'all getting it. And so they ended up including the 11 episodes. That was like a deed of gift, or gift deed or whatever, that I had to sign. And I wanted to make sure when this happened, I was like, now I just want to be clear about this. Is this the first podcast for the National Museum of African American History and Culture? Or is this the first podcast for like all of the Smithsonian institutions? And they were like, oh, well, we'll run it by our internal affairs and see. And so then they came back and they were like, yeah, it's the first podcast for all the Smithsonian. And I was like, hired a PR firm to try to get the word out about it. Because as you probably know, or definitely will probably see, like, it's really hard for, how can I put this? And I think it is still such the case, and probably even more so now with the way folks are talking about DEI. It's really hard for people to recognize Black creativity outside of fashion. Like, outside of fashion design, it's really hard for people to like look at fine artists or web designers or digital designers as like, these are people that are like doing work that you should be paying attention to. Because there were lots of outlets that I would pitch Revision Path to that never got back to us. You name a Black outlet, they no. So yeah, Ebony, which really like, kind of like, that was like a shot to the heart, because I know the Johnsons, like, they're not like family friends, but like Eunice Johnson grew up with my grandmother in Marion Junction, Alabama. So like there was always like this kind of like
connection,
family. And so when Ebony was like, it's not, well, also, I mean, this was it was 2018, 2019. Ebony's not the Ebony we grew up with, so that was part of it. But like, you know, lots of folks were like, no, we're not. I think the only black outlet that covered us was Blavity, and maybe The Root. I think The Root did too. I think those were the only two, but like a lot of others were just like, we're not talking about this. Like it's not.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's not sports, it's not entertainment, it's not gossip. We're not gonna talk about it. Like I hired a PR firm to get the word out about it, and like we got picked up by Fast Company, and they did an article, and that's when it like the word really got out, when people knew about it then. Because it's one thing for me to announce it on the show, but like you kind of have to be listening to the show to know that. And it's one thing for me to put that out on social, but then it's like, are people really gonna, when a more reputable institution says something about it that has a much larger reach than you do, then it's
right.
This is a big deal,
Yeah.
And so that's when it really started to become a thing. And like it was also at the time we did our 300th episode celebration in New York City at the Green Space, which was and still is like a big part of like NYC radio and podcasting. Ironically enough, and I'm going to talk my shit here for a little bit.
Go for it.
Enough, at the time that I was like trying to book the Green Space to do an interview, there was a woman there, Rebecca Carroll, I think is her name. And she was doing this like series on like famous black podcasters or well-known black podcasters. And like I had pitched myself to be on the show, and like the response I got back was like, I've never heard of you. I'm like, okay, look, I'm not tripping over it, but I was like, okay, hey, because I remember they had Tracy Clayton, who at the time I think had just finished another round or was doing another round with BuzzFeed. They had Crystal West from The Read. I forget who else they had on. But I remember I pitched myself, and they were like, we don't know you. Okay. And I was in the Smithsonian. It don't mean anything, but okay, fine. Like I really wasn't tripping over it. What's so funny is that the news came out, and then we were at the Green Space, and then she was in my inbox, and I deleted the message. Because I'm like, why you want to talk to me now? It's too late now.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, that's how like the whole like Smithsonian thing ended up happening. It's funny because I think it helped to certainly increase the show's reach. Like people found out about it. But the Smithsonian thing was like a double-edged sword. Like it was good in that it got the word out about it, but then people started to feel like, I got a lot of like mixed reactions from the news. Like one, the job that I worked at hated it. Like I got demoted at work, later got fired. And
you got demoted?
Yeah. Like the day after the news came out, I got demoted at
my God.
that job. And I was like, they demoted me, they stripped me of my team, and I was just like kind of floating for a few months, and then they fired me along with a bunch of other people right when the pandemic started. So I was like, damn, well, okay. And you would think that having a podcast in the Smithsonian means like you're going to get a lot of offers and things thrown at for you, like that will open up another like window of opportunity or possibility for work.
None.
Nope.
Oh wow.
Nope. I guess I remember I was interviewing for work. Like I would be interviewed for jobs, and I'll put that on my resume. I couldn't even get an interview with it. I would tell people like, you could take that Smithsonian thing and $10 and probably get like a gallon of gas. Like it really didn't mean anything because it hadn't. Like, it's an accolade for my career, and I'm not downplaying it by any means. Like, I put in the work to make it happen. But it has not had the payoff that I think other people would expect. Like, other people are like, oh, well, you must be doing a whole bunch of public speaking. I was like, I haven't spoken in like 3 years.
Damn.
You must be getting a whole bunch of offers for things. No, my inbox is tumbleweeds in it, mostly. Especially since I stopped doing the show. Like, people are like, and you are? Maurice, who? God, that name sounds familiar. Like, so it's an honor. I'm honored about it. That's why we used it at the t-shirt. I was like, maybe I do need to like do that and like really talk my shit. Like maybe I need to
do it. Do
that.
Dude, instead of this background, have a digital rafter behind you and just put everything on there. Be like, first ever podcast to be inducted. Boom, put the star. I would make it like a full NBA rafter right behind you. So when you get on here, people would be like, so who are you? Oh, do you not see these behind me? Do you not see this? Man, I did not know it was going to be Like that promotes your list for
I
you.
compare it to, and I only mean this in terms of what I've heard and not from what I've experienced, but like I would compare it to when, say, like a Black actor gets like an Oscar or something, and you would think that you've gotten like this thing that is like at the pinnacle of your career, and that it would
Right.
open you up to more things, and it doesn't.
Yeah.
At least maybe not in that particular thing. Like I think about Jennifer Hudson getting the Oscar, and then I want to say like maybe a year or two later she was doing like a Three Stooges movie, and it's like, but you just
You
got an
just,
Oscar,
yeah,
But I also understand like bills got to get paid.
right.
Like in the same way that when I first got my first design job because I needed to have bills paid, like I understand like you just have to take some stuff for utility, but it did not have the, and it's not to say that it's like, it didn't have the effect that I anticipated because I didn't know what to anticipate from that. Like I thought it was great. I actually got more speaking opportunities from, I hate to say this, but I actually got more speaking opportunities from the whole summer of racial reckoning and like, how can we help out Black people? Like I got more like press and things from that than from the Smithsonian. Like I would have companies that would want me to speak and they basically want me to like absolve them of their racist practices. And it's like, is the check clearing? Because I'll say what you need to say if the money hits my account because I got bills to pay and I don't have a job. So
Wow.
it's tricky. And like now I'm coming up on 1 year of not having done the show. Like I ended up basically winding down and ending the show because for a few reasons. I'll talk about the reasons. I know we're going pretty long. I'll talk about the reasons.
No, we have nothing but time.
I was gonna say this is the first interview I've done about this since October of 23, and I don't even think I talked about it back then. But I did the podcast for a few reasons. One, I was broke. Like it cost money to put the show on.
Yeah.
And I was not making money from the show in the way that I had been before.
Mm-hmm.
One, that's because a lot of companies, like how you're seeing now this kind of like removal of DEI policies and all that sort of stuff. A lot of companies started that back in 23. And now that this administration has taken over, it's given them carte blanche to just like delete it and get rid of it altogether. So like I was seeing a drastic level of a drastic drop in the level of sponsors that I would get, or even the amount of money that I would be offered. Two, while the community loved the show, while the community supported the show, it wasn't monetarily. So a lot of people love the show. Oh, you should do this. You should be doing this. You should be doing this. Okay. If you want to give us $5 a month,
no,
I mean, well, I ain't got it, but so we were not getting like community support. We weren't getting financial support from sponsors that we had before. Also, like I was unemployed all of 2023, and I might as well tell it because it's happening. Two of my past sponsors sued me because they had eliminated their DEI, programs or what have you, and were basically trying to get their money back.
They sued you to get their money back for
being
a sponsor on your podcast? That don't even sound right.
You would think that. So one of them we like settled and it was fine. Like it didn't go anywhere. But the other one I'm still paying because they had more high priced lawyers. I'll tell you what it is after the show. But like there's
Oh my God. I've never heard of that.
So like I was broke and like having to pay, like the fact that I was also having to like pay back sponsor money. And I was like, I'm not making money and I'm already having to pay back. Like the show was costing me more money than it was to put on.
What?
It was getting harder to get guests because, we talked about this before we started recording, like podcasting has now really shifted more towards video. And we've been an audio only podcast for 500 something episodes, but people were like, they wanted to come into a set with like diagonal club chairs and Shure mics on boom arms. And I'm like, brother, I ain't got it. Like, we can do this over Skype. Like I've done these other hundreds of interviews. You can take it or leave it. And most people decided to leave it. So like it became harder to get guests because they wanted to be like seen on something. Like actually, I think some of the last few podcasts, what I thought was funny was that they would record themselves, like they would record their video on a set somewhere, and I'm just like this disembodied, like floating head voice or something. Like they wanted to have something they could like put on TikTok or Instagram or whatever to show like they do. Just like whatever. So I was broke. It was costing me money. It was harder to get guests. And the combination of those things really just kind of like took the joy out of it. Like it wasn't fun anymore.
Right.
Like I still enjoy having conversations with Black designers. If an apparatus were set up where I could do this and not have to pay for it, I would continue to do this. Like I didn't stop because, I felt like it came to an end. Like it came to an end because like the funds ran out and I'm having to pay back a sponsor now, like hundreds of dollars a month until I will finish paying them off this year. And then it's fuck them forever. But like it stopped because it just got to a point where it was no longer tenable. It wasn't fun anymore for me to keep doing it. And I was just like, this needs to come to an end. And I wanted it to come to an end at like a nice round number. And so it came to the end with like episode 550, which if you count the bonus episodes, it's 555 episodes. So I wanted it to come to like a nice like round. And I didn't want it to just like abruptly stop. I didn't want it to be, a series on UPN where you just watch it and then all of a sudden, this is the series finale. And like I had talked into doing a final episode because I wasn't gonna do one. I was pissed.
Right.
I was, and
rightfully so.
And I should mention the year of 2023 when all this happened was Revision Pass 10th anniversary year.
Wow.
And I had pitched the show to outlets, just like I said before with the Smithsonian thing, pitched the show to outlets to talk about the 10th anniversary and all this stuff, and not a single person would pick it up. You will not find a single interview in 2023 about Revision Pass 10th anniversary because one never happened. I ended up interviewing myself for the 10th anniversary of Revision Pass. So I had to be talked into doing the final episode because I was like, y'all can have it. Like, I hadn't even talked about the like issues and run-ins I had with like other Black designers, with AIGA, with other Black design groups. Like, I was like, y'all can have it. All of this, I didn't sign up for all of this. I wanted to interview Black designers and put us out there on the platform. And now all of this other stuff has gotten into it. Like, y'all are affecting my livelihood as a person. Like, it was bad. It really got bad. And I had to be talking to doing the final episode. Shout out to Lisa Babb, who she's been on the show before. I think episode 264 or something like that. But she's a good friend of mine. But she had to talk me into it because I was like, it's a wrap. Y'all got it. Y'all got 500 episodes. Like, you want to listen to it so bad? Go to the Blacksonian. It's there. I got a whole page. I got 2 pages actually on the Smithsonian's website. One's like my bio and one's got the episodes. I was like, there it is. Y'all want it? It's right there. Go have it. You don't need anything else from me. But she had to talk me into it, and she interviewed me for the final episode, and she even coordinated like reaching out to people to like record little like things to say at the end of the episode. And I'll be honest with you, I have yet to listen to the final episode of Revision Path. We published. Really? I said, I'm out. I have not listened to the final episode at all. I don't remember what I said. I don't know what other people said. I'll go back and listen to it one day. It's there. It's on a folder on my network drive. So I can, if I wanted to listen to it, I could, but I just hadn't because I was donezo. By the time that last episode went, I was done.
Wow.
Stick a fork in me. Done.
What? I'm just so baffled. Like, you really don't, like, me personally, hearing your podcast, I was like, damn, this is good. This is really good.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And now hearing directly from your mouth, like, why you stopped it and what you had to go through, that sucks.
Yeah.
It just sucks. I don't know what else to say.
When it stopped, and I mean, when you reached out to me, this, again, like I said, I haven't been interviewed since October of 23. And even that interview wasn't about Revision Path. It was about my studio. It was about lunch. I kind of, after I ended the show, I really just sort of like took myself out of the design community. Like, unsubscribed from newsletters. I canceled my Adobe subscription. I was like, you know what? It's fine. Like, if I want to come back to design, it'll be there. But I feel like I've given a lot to y'all, and all I've got to show for it are these monthly payments I need to make back to this legal firm from a sponsor that's suing me. Like, I still have like merch and stuff here that I've never been able to sell. I don't know. I'll put it in my storage unit eventually one day or something. But like, I was done with design. And to be honest with you, kind of still done with it. Especially as the show ended, and I put this in my final message where I was like, I want you to see that this is like the path is open for all of you. I kind of wanted to see what else would like come up in the absence of Revision Path. Not to say there needed to be like a spiritual successor or something like that, but like I knew other Black designers that were doing other podcasts that like talk to other Black designers. So like, I know that I'm not the only one out here. And the deafening silence after I stopped my show that I still hear to this day, I'm just like, wow. So I guess I was really the only one out here talking about this regularly, because I'm not seeing anything. I'm not hearing anything. Like, I pulled all the way back after I ended the show. Like, I'm not on social media anymore. I shut down my LinkedIn account. Like, if you want to find me, you need to write me that at my website, which you did, because I'm like, it's y'all got it. I'm so over it now. I mean, I'll put it like this. When it happened, I was like very pissed about it. Now that it's not like, at least over a year, but I have perspective on it now that I didn't have then. And especially now with how quickly the tech community, which I would imagine at this point, the design community is probably in lockstep with respect to getting rid of DEI. Like, I don't know who's really advocating or looking out for us now anymore. I don't know who those entities are, who those groups are, who those people are, because it's, again, like it just feels like there's been this silence since I stopped, and I really thought I would still be hearing more, and I haven't. And
does that bother you a little bit?
Does it bother me a little bit? It does. But I also realize that this climate is now very like DEI unfriendly. I think whoever happens to be leading the country dictates what the general popular culture shifts towards. Like, if you look at when Obama was president, things were about like hope and change and diversity. You started to see those things trickle out through businesses, through organizations, etc. Now, like, being mean is in. Like, being a jerk is in style. Like, Kendrick got a Grammy off of this song. Like being your worst self and being on your worst behavior is celebrated now. So, I mean, I would still like to see what could come out during this time. I mean, I started Revision Path in 2013, and, there wasn't a whole lot of talk about diversity and inclusion really back then. Like, you started to see some of it in the tech industry, but it certainly didn't reach its height until I want to say like the mid 2010s going into 2020. But, I would be interested to see like what comes out from this time, but I don't know. I did get asked the other day, like, if I would bring Revision Path back, and, it would take a well-funded, secure operation in order to make that happen. If I were to bring Revision Path back, I would not do it the way I did it from 2013 to 2024, which is by myself. I mean, I had RJ, I had my small team, but like, I would not do it without not knowing like where the money's coming from,
Got it.
Because as much as I did Revision Path in terms of interviewing, all those people and doing podcasting and stuff, like, I can't get a job in podcasting. I can't even get an interview as a podcast, anything now. And it's not to say that, it didn't give me any skills. It certainly gave me skills, but like, it sort of just feels like it's almost like a merit badge in a way. Like, it's a good thing to say, I've done this thing, but it hasn't netted me a benefit, which I can say has been like a direct corollary of that, if that makes any sense.
Man, but I'm going to just tell you now, I know the accolades haven't came, but I'm telling you right now, Maurice, man, you're huge. You're dynamic. Like, you do.
Downer on during Black History.
No. It's not a downer, dude. It's legit. Like, you gave us 500 episodes of Black designers who no one even knew.
Yeah.
No one knew she did Mariah Carey's website. No one knew all these other people were so phenomenal in literally the design and creative field. Nobody knows these. You can't even Google them. If you Google them, it'll give you 14 different names that you got to click through to try to find who you're looking for. And you've given people a direct link. I mean, it sucks that you didn't get your just dues, but I'm gonna give you your flowers now, man. Thank you. Like
I appreciate that.
Your voice needed to do that. Your time has not been forgotten on us, because I'm telling you now, like, it was from one conversation I had with a person we both know. And then that led me to going down the rabbit hole and listening to your podcast and being like, here's Black designers. Because as a Black designer myself, it's not a lot. You know, the famous ones, and we love them. But it's just like, I'm 37. Where are the people that are in my pocket?
Yeah.
You know, the 30 to maybe even 45, 50, that little sweet pocket. I don't know any. And you gave us a whole list of them. And that was just like phenomenal, man. And I'm sorry that the world probably didn't see it, or society didn't see it that way. But I took it as a true gem. I took it as a solid, like, yo, this man doing the Lord's work out here. Because I had no clue who any of these people were until it's like I listen, and then I go look them up specifically based off of the information you give in the podcast. And I'm like, oh, you're kind of legit. You're like, because it's like, if you don't know them directly, you don't know that they designed that movie poster, they created this font, they did this text. Like, you don't know any of this. And man, I'm gonna just say thank you. Even if no one else, if no one else says thank you, I'm gonna say thank you, because it gives me another source of information that I can pass on to my classes. Since I'm in the education space, I can share with students to just listen. It doesn't matter anything, because look at this information right here. Go use it. It can be used in research. Like, that's the thing. Like, a lot of this can be used in a research paper. Even if you're going for a PhD or even an MFA. I have my MFA. And so it was just like, this can be used in research. Like, you've given someone.
I've had a number of students over the years that have reached out, like, and have used Revision Path in papers, have used it in books, have used it even as curriculum in some places.
Stanford needs to get a hold of it and lock it up in there too.
I don't know about that. I'll tell the story, because at this point I ain't got nothing to, not to anything, but like, as Revision Path was like ending and wrapping up, there were two places that I spoke with that there was some interest in talk about acquisition. One of them was Stanford.
Okay.
The other one was Morgan State University.
Okay.
And in my mind, I was like, I really would prefer it to be with an HBCU, like, if it went anywhere, because I'm like, it's
us. Yeah.
And honestly, I wanted it to be in my alma mater, but Morehouse ain't got the archive for that. So I was like, it's not even a conversation to have. But I talked with Stanford first, and I think they were really just interested in, like, they just wanted the podcasts. And I'm like, I'm kind of still out here in these streets. Like, you've acquired some things, you know, posthumously, but like, I'm very much alive. Like, I could speak at classes, I could do certain things. And I was like, I also have like posters and memorabilia. Like, it could be an exhibit. Like, it doesn't just have to be the podcast. And like, the conversation kind of broke down after that. So I was like, also, they wasn't going to pay. And again, I got legal shit to pay back. So any place that was interested in acquisition. And to be clear, I did not get any money, because this has been a huge rumor that has went around, is that I got paid, or that I paid the Smithsonian to have the episodes in there. I didn't pay them, and they damn sure didn't pay me.
Okay.
That was the gift of deed. There was no monetary transaction at all for me to be in the Smithsonian. But Stanford was not going to pay anything. And not that I think that they should have, but like, just the conversation around it sort of broke down. Wow. And then Morgan State, that never even really left the ground. Like, we couldn't even get on a call together to have a discussion. Like, the calls were going, not even the calls, the messages were being proxied through other people. And I'm like, here's my phone number, just call me. Or here's my email address, just message me. And like,
we can set it up. Yeah.
It never happened. So like, it never got off the ground. And so after I was like, yeah, it doesn't seem like this is going anywhere, I'm going to like pull out of this. they were like, oh, well, we have like a professor position open if you're interested in applying. And I'm like, why would I do that? You all came to me about acquiring my show and telling me about ways that it could be distributed through their like Sirius XM station and all this kind of stuff. And we can't even get on a phone call, but now I have to like apply for something that you initially were going to offer to me for free? Make that make sense.
So do you think they were going to try to get you on board as a professor and be like, hey, we got a studio here. You can shoot it here and do all this and this? Yeah. Yeah.
Your guess is as good as mine because we never had a conversation about it. This all came in an email through someone else about what they could offer. So I never talked to anyone at the school about it. So I don't know. I don't know.
Wow, man, that you never know the real story until you ask someone. You never know.
Listen, and like I said, I haven't done an interview about this. So like you're getting like everything I'm telling you is the first time any of this is being made public. So
wow. Oh my goodness. Man, I'm not even shying away from it. It just sucks. Like I'm hearing this and it's just like, I wonder if people ever took time to just sit and listen. That's what I think a lot of people missed on is just listen. That's all you have to do. Like a majority of my consuming of podcasts is when I'm driving to work and when I'm coming home from work, which is about an hour. So, and a podcast usually runs about an hour. So it's just like, it takes nothing off of you to just listen. So, oh my gosh, Maurice, thank you. I'm saying thank you. No one else says it.
Thank you.
I'm saying thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So,
I mean, things may happen in the future. I mean, I'm assuming by the time this podcast comes out, there'll be an announcement of I'm doing a fireside chat with Web Agency Summit in May. I think it's like the first week of May that I'm doing. So I'm like slowly starting to like get back out there in terms of like talking about stuff. But like when I wrapped the show, I was like, don't talk to me. And don't talk to me. I'm done. I need to sit somewhere and like sort through
life.
Yeah. Right now.
Yeah. Wow. So, Maurice, this conversation's great, man.
I
love it.
It's a totally different direction than you brought.
But listen, I am everything and flexible. Listen, I go with the flow. But I'm just curious now, like what your legacy, like with all the work you've done, this podcast, lunch, Smithsonian, now the Eames, like how do you want to be remembered, man? In the creative, like I was going to say in the creative world, but I feel like you in the creative world got a little bit of beef right now. So I'm just going to say, just in general, how do you want to be remembered, man? Because you've touched a lot. You've done a lot. So that's why I'm like, how? What does the story look like for you?
I mean, honestly, I think I want to be remembered. Like, and I say that for two reasons. One, it is so easy, and it has been so easy, and I definitely have found this through doing the show. It's so easy for the contributions and the work of Black designers to either be misattributed or just completely not mentioned. Like, when I think back on like even the press that I've gotten with Revision Path and things like that, like I think of like from the show's perspective, the outlets we were able to reach and things like that, but like, the actual like design community, like the AIGAs and the graphic artist guilds and communication arts and all that stuff, generally did not want to have anything to do with me. And like, unless you're already in the space of maybe paying attention to something around Black design or DEI or something like that, you have no idea of like who I am, what Revision Path is, what my contributions are. I'm just another Black person, and it's very easy for that stuff to be kind of like just forgotten in that way. So like there's that. The second thing is, and I think we've certainly started to see it now from this current administration, is like content on the web is ephemeral. Like we've seen entire government websites gone in like the blink of an eye with no archive. And people will think, oh, well, the Internet Archive, they got it. Internet Archive is a small nonprofit of like 20, 30 people that are getting sued constantly. Like, and like for the good that they do not, and I'm speaking for them. I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that for the good that they do not get as much financial support as they need to really keep things going.
Wow.
So, I mean, look at Wikipedia. Is Wikipedia not always asking for money when you go to
All the
search for
time.
something? Like,
$5, $10,
right,
$1, something.
the web was never meant to be an archive. It was a research tool. I mean, to dive into like what's happening in other places, but I say all that to say, like, you know, it could be very easy for like the whole Revision Path archive to just be up and gone like that. One thing that I did purposely when I ended the show, one, I stopped my audio host subscription because that was expensive, but I put all the episodes on YouTube. So like if you want to see them, like they're on the world's like second largest search engine, like they're all on YouTube, and I made sure to link every single episode on the site to the YouTube so you could like watch it for free, listen to it for free. Because there's not going to be a guarantee that like those MP3s are going to be there forever, but you could still listen to the episode. Like I did that on purpose as an archiving method because I knew I wasn't going to pay to keep the SoundCloud up and keep the Simplecast hosting instance, you know, because again, I was using sponsor money to pay for that. And like without it, I'm paying like $300, $400 a year. And I'm like, I don't have the money for that, especially if I'm not continually producing shows. So like it doesn't make a difference. But yeah, like I just want to be remembered. I don't want Revision Path or like the work and the things that I've done to be forgotten because again, it's very easy to be overlooked. And with the way that websites now can easily just be taken offline, it can easily just be gone in the blink of an eye. Like Revision Path could like just not exist and no one could know anything about it. So I just want to be remembered, period.
Yeah. I just think for you and for myself, we're just in a very specific niche. I think that's what it is like art school graduate podcast. There's not many African-American art school graduates, you know, doing this. And there's not many Black designers trying to, you know, archive other Black designers to keep the story and the history going. So I think definitely it's a very niche thing, but I will do my best to push it out whenever I can. And I just want to continue to say thank you. One last thing before we get up out of here. What piece of advice would you give to creatives now? I mean, whether they're a designer, strategist, podcaster, I mean, they want to build something, they want to make an impact. What advice would you give them?
What advice would I give? I mean, given these very fraught times, I'm really trying to think of what makes the most sense, like situationally. I mean, I would say above anything else, like don't wait. Like get started on the thing that you want to do now. Like it's never going to be perfect when you start. If you're waiting for it to be perfect when you start, the only thing that will happen is that you'll get older. And you'll get further away from even wanting to do it. Like put out the thing that you're doing in an incomplete state, work in public, refine as you go. You will approach the point where it's something that you will, you know, especially like really be proud of. Like I call it like having an upgrade path. Like when I started Revision Path, there was no podcast, or at least I didn't think of doing it as a podcast. It started as one thing, it turned into something else, and I kept it going as that something else. And now it's in the Smithsonian, which is great. But I say that to say, like, just start where you are with what you have. Like, put it out there in the state that it is and keep working on it. That's really the best advice that I can give right now. Like, don't wait until you think things may be better. Like, it is so easy now to put any kind of content online. Anything. It is so easy to put it online. I'm saying this in the sense of if you even want to share it online, it's really more so that the tools now are so democratized that anyone can use them. Like anyone with a smartphone has access to like really good cameras. They probably got some kind of video editing software, whether that's CapCut or something else. You know, I don't know what, you know, Reels has or anything like that. You can type, of course. You got the Notes app. Like there's like your smartphone in your hand has enough computing power for you to create from there. It doesn't have to be the full magnum opus, but it's a start. It's it's something to start from. So my advice is to just start. Like if you're noodling on an idea, if there's like analysis paralysis and you deciding on like what tool should I use or how should I do it, just start. Just get started. And if you want to put it out there, again, there's more avenues now to do that than there were before, but just start. That's my advice.
Thank you. Well, you guys, thank you so much for listening to our podcast. I had the great, and I'm going to say it again, the great Maurice Cherry. And you guys, this is the Art School Graduate Podcast. We'll catch you guys later. Peace.
All right. Thanks for having me.